It's. Let me change the background. Hang on. Dang it, Nick. That's why I gotta. That's. There we go. Well, that was really hard. All right, we're gonna get going in a second here. We've got everybody coming in. Tweet it out. We'll be with everybody in just 1 second. Nick, I believe they are ready to roll. They do not want to wait. Everybody is ready to talk. All right. For Nick Torre, I am Keith Niebuhr. This is Talking Gators, Gators Online Live. We do this after every game, either the day after or the day after the day after on our YouTube channel. And, you know, we're going to talk about the game Saturday night in Baton Rouge, Florida's 52-35 loss. Then we're going to look ahead a little bit. I'm the host. Nick is the expert here, so we're going to really lean on him for the good stuff. But Nick, when you woke up Saturday morning, you hopefully brushed your teeth, hopefully showered, washed whatever you might have picked up on Bourbon Street off of your body, got dressed, got in a car, drove to New Orleans. Did you expect to see history on the drive to Baton Rouge? Because Saturday night you saw history, first team to ever produce 700 yards of offense against the Florida Gators, LSU finishing with 701. Quarterback Jaden Daniels passed for over 350, rushed for over 200. Am I getting that right? 350, 200 for over, 600 total yards?
606 total yards.
Yeah. Also, something that hadn't been done against the Florida defense. And I believe, did I read that was the best total offensive output in the history of the SEC?
By a player, yes.
Yes.
First time a player has ever thrown for 350 and rushed for 200 in a single game in FBS history.
Yeah. So Nick, when the other team does something against you that's never been done before, it can be concerning, obviously, and that's how everybody, I think, was feeling after that game. It was just one drive after the other. LSU again winning 52-35, and also let's not forget had a goal line stand against them that kept them from scoring even more points. So Nick, let's start with that. What happened to the Florida defense on Saturday night? I mean, obviously a multitude of things, and LSU had something to do with that as well. But again, never in the history, 100+ years of Gator football, had an opponent had 700 yards. Break it down for us. Give me some juice here.
I'm going to pull up these stats because I think, first off, listen, LSU's offense has victimized a lot of defenses this year. And make no mistake about it, Florida was a victim of an LSU defense or an offense that is one of the most explosive in the entire country. I joked with some of the guys that work at UF before the game, like down the field. I was like, hey, I think LSU is going to get 600 yards tonight. I probably should have said, hey, Jaden Daniels is going to get 600 yards on his own tonight. Jaden Daniels had more yards of total offense than Florida had. And I think go ahead, Keith.
I'm sure they appreciated that joke, but go.
Oh, that's I've been here a while. And as you get to know me, Keith, I'm very sarcastic. It's just my just who I am. I'm sarcastic. I like to have fun. And even if it's a joke, it's probably going to be sarcastic. I didn't think that I thought LSU could get 600 yards, 50 points. 700 is a little more than 600, but nothing that happened surprised me. Nothing really that has happened outside of losing to Arkansas has surprised me this season. I think Florida's young. I don't know how long I'll keep saying that next year, Keith, because I think when you look at this class that's coming in, they'll probably try to say we're young again. But I don't know how long I'll keep, carrying their water for that. When I look at this game, I'm not going back before this. When I look at Austin Armstrong's defenses at Southern Miss, they gave up a lot of explosive plays. And I think that's a product of, hey, we're going to play man. We're going to bring some pressure. We're going to be aggressive. And sometimes when you're aggressive, you get beat. And when you're playing a quarterback as dynamic as Jaden Daniels is, if you're playing man, I think Billy Niebuhr said best. It's like you can play zone and die a slow death because they're going to get their yards. It's going to take longer. Or you can play man and die a quick death. And I think Florida chose to do a mixture of both. And it was like they were tarred and feathered on the way to the guillotine. They died a quick and slow death. on Saturday night. And with that to say, there was still a chance. Florida had a lead in the third quarter. Now, it was just a track meet, and Florida was not prepared to score with LSU. LSU scored on every single possession. I scored a touchdown, not just a field goal. I scored a touchdown every single possession in the second half. I asked a question to Billy Napier last week, and he kind of threw him off, it seemed. Maybe something he hadn't thought about.
All right, I think we lost Nick for a second. Let's wait for Nick to jump back in here, and we'll get back at it. And one of the things we're going to talk about is, I want Nick to explain to everyone, what he sees is missing from this defense. In other words, can you and I, everybody that's watching, and me and everybody else, what can we expect from this defense next year at the University of Florida? And can that defense make the strides it needs to be for Florida to be more competitive next year? So, those are important questions. What's missing? We know they're young. We know that some of these young guys are going to expand. Their roles are going to expand next year. They're going to be better players. They're going to learn. You always make your biggest jump again from your first year to your second year, supposedly, theoretically, right? But where will they need to add a few pieces where that defense, we will see major strides next year? So before Nick gets back, I'll tell you what I think. And obviously, I'm not the expert. I cover it from the recruiting point of view. Obviously, you got to get off the field on third down. It is a big issue, right? If you can't do that, you're not going to win a lot of games. So to do that, you need to get to the quarterback. Now, Jane Daniels is a freak. He's a guy that may win the Heisman, right? So he can elude and escape pressure, but you have to make life uncomfortable for him. You need edge rushers that not only can get to the quarterback, but also know how to set the edge. They don't go too far inside, thus leaving the outside lanes open. So I think Florida, in their recruiting class, you see some very talented edge players. For instance, 5-star LJ McCray, 4-star Kendall Jackson, 4-star Maris Williams. But are those guys going to be prepared to step into larger roles next year, right, as freshmen? LJ McCray, probably. The other guys, I don't know. They'll play a guy if he's good enough. We've seen that. But are they going to be just guys that are just out there, or can they make big impacts? All right, well, looks like we've got Nick back. All right, Nick, you're back. The question I asked myself that I said I'm going to ask you is this. Okay, so looking at this Florida defense, give me 3 places where they could improve next year. They need to improve to make some big jumps. Look, we know they're young. We know there's some talented players coming back. I was just talking about edge rusher. Obviously, Justice Boone was injured this season. It feels like to me, if they can get off the field on third down, that would solve a lot of their problems. And so you got to have elite edge rushers. I think they have to go, and obviously they're adding 5-star LJ McCray, but I think they have to go in the portal and find somebody that could come in right away that has been through those battles on Saturday, not just a guy that's been through the battles on Friday night. But what would you say? Give me 2 or 3 areas where you think if Florida, given the pieces they'll have coming back, that they can, if they can do something in these areas, they should be able to be at least a serviceable defense next year. Because right now, they're not even that, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the linebackers just to start, Keith. Without Shamar James, I think you're just not SEC good enough at that position. I thought they Florida had a bunch of depth there, and you could mix guys around, but I just don't know that you're good enough at an SEC level. Manny Nunnery's okay. Derek Wingo has been a career backup and is injured. Scooby Williams is playing hurt. Like that, the entire room's hurt. So I look at the linebacker room. Can you get better? Like Shamar James comes back, you expect him to take a jump. After he comes back from his knee surgery, and is it Jaden Robinson? Is it one of the 4 guys that they have committed? Can you play a freshman linebacker? The staff has shown that they will play. You've got to finish. Like Florida gets a bunch of pressure. They affect the quarterback. They don't finish. They don't get sacks. They're not getting turnovers. And I think that's a huge glaring area that you can point to right now, is that Florida might be affecting the quarterback, but they're not finishing. They're not getting, they're getting pressure, but they're not getting sacks. They're not creating enough pressure to then affect the quarterback to throw interceptions or get a turnover. So it's been a defense, I think, that through the first 4 games-ish, we probably thought, hey, this is really good. Austin Armstrong's got it going. And then as you got into the teeth of the schedule, they've kind of just been exposed and exposed both for their youth and for their inability to create turnovers and create sacks.
All right, Nick, you just looked at those numbers and you're like, man, how is that possible? Florida's had young teams before. This probably isn't the youngest Florida team in the history of the school. And those young teams played very good teams, and they never gave up that many yards. And it's just a tough pill, I think, for everybody to swallow. And as a coaching staff is preaching patience and hey, there's a lot of youth here, and just bear with us. It's so hard because this also is the portal area. Is it unrealistic for fans to be patient for a 4-year rebuild? Are they going to need to see something next year, Nick, or do you run the risk of losing an entire fan base if you don't produce something next year?
Yeah, if Florida goes, if they go under 500 this year, you're already guaranteed to go under 500 in the SEC both years to start. If you do that for a 3rd year, it's totally reasonable for the fan base to want to change. I'm tired of change. I've been here since 2013, and this is the 4th coach. So I mean, I'm averaging. The coaches are averaging. A coach's lifespan under me, or under me covering the beat, Keith, is like 2.5 seasons. But I think if Billy Napier is not getting the job done, if Florida is not going to have a 8 win season, show some improvement, have another elite recruiting class, and we'll talk about recruiting later in this if you want to, with some decommitments, you have to stack elite classes, not stack good classes. I went back a little while ago and did like the offensive line, but Billy Napier's first class at Florida, like those guys, a lot of the guys in that class aren't going to make an impact. And now you're looking at the second class, which are the freshmen now, and okay, well, we think there's some guys that'll make an impact, but when are you going to start getting returns on that? And if we're then going to be counting on the 24 class, well, shoot, if you have another 6 and 6, 5 and 7 year in 2024, are we looking at Billy Napier not being able to coach the guys that he recruited? And I think when Scott Strickland hired him, it was in Scott's mind a 4 to 5 year rebuild. But I don't know that in the transfer portal era, you'll get 4 to 5 years to go under 500, under 500, under 500, 500. I don't know that you'll get that or that you should get that, to be honest.
Yeah. I think he knows that. Look, I mean, the guy, he's not a dumb guy. Here's some things that could be working against him, though. Obviously, if you go 5 and 7 this year, you go into next year perception-wise on the hot seat. Reality-wise, we don't know. I don't make the decisions, right? Perception, though, is often reality. It certainly is to the world out there and to recruits. People who write checks to NIL. Does that impact how much they're willing to spend? So there's that element as well. Florida's going to announce soon that they've chosen an architect. The school has chosen an architect for the renovations to the swamp. That's going to be a $400 to $500 or more $1 million project. If you aren't winning games, it's harder to get people to pony up and give you the money. You have a newish president, okay? You have an AD that probably is thinking, well, they need to win some games, not just for them, but for me, right? So you've got all these things working, all these things swirling around in their own little whatevers. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, Nick, but all these things happening, right? And it can make life harder. Now, Billy Napier as a coach has to kind of just focus on what's in front of him, and he can't worry about all that other stuff, but it doesn't mean they aren't factors. So ultimately, you've got to win games. He knows that. You look at the schedule to next year, Nick, and we'll talk about the schedule remaining this year too, but you look at the schedule next year, and I think you brought it up beautifully to me, that, hey, look, on paper, yes, it looks really good. It looks impossible, but FSU is going to be replacing a lot of guys, right? That'll be in Gainesville next year.
18 seniors. It'll be in Tallahassee next year, but
in Tallahassee next year, excuse me.
18 seniors, including their all-world quarterback.
That's right. A guy that they recruited over for a couple classes and then suddenly fell in love with when they realized he could play. Texas very well could have a new starting quarterback next year. A&M, we know, is going to have a new coach next year. I think they play Mississippi State. They're going to have a new coach next year. LSU is losing a guy that just did what we just talked about. He won't be there next year. So change.
Other than Ole Miss, there is massive change in all of these rosters,
Yeah.
and we won't know. I look at the roster, I look at the schedule for next year, and I think Florida is bringing everything back. You're going to lose Princely Mumialan, you're going to lose Ricky Pearsall. Other than that, of guys that are contributing, like they're going to lose some other guys, like Dante Sanders graduates, Kingsley Aguakin, and Micah Mazuka. I was told today are like thinking about going to the NFL, and I don't understand what that thought process is or why they would do that or who is giving them bad information, but I don't think they should. But other than that, Florida brings back everyone. And you can argue, Keith, I think the cynical argument is, well, if you bring back a bunch of bad players, it doesn't make them good next year. But I think Florida will come back experienced and with a bunch of depth next year, whereas the teams that they're playing that we look and we think, hey, that's hard, they're going to be working in new players, specifically new starting quarterbacks, and I expect Graham Mertz to be back. So Florida has a lot going for it in that regard.
We got one quick question. Jeremy says, "Where's Corey Bender at? The greatest." So Corey Bender this is not the recruiting show. So Corey will be with me later this week. We'll talk some more recruiting. This is Nick Della Torre. Negative Nick is he's known in many circles, but actually he's been more positive. I don't know what's going on to the back of your screen, Nick. Nick, are you there? You're muted somehow.
I don't know what that was, but I enjoyed my fireworks.
Yeah, negative Nick lighting up like the 4th of July. But so the thing is, so they're going to have a lot of guys back next year, and so the excuses. And I'm not saying they're making a ton this year. They're using excuses. The question is, how valid is it? And fans have to determine that for themselves. I mean, it's a very young team. Okay, so Jordan Castell's a young safety. He took a bad angle, let's say, on Jaden Daniels' long run, whatever. So that's a valid excuse. Now, but as somebody who then takes it a step further, it's also valid to then say, okay, Nick, why is he playing? Why wasn't there more done at safety so he didn't have to be thrown out there? You know what I mean? Why is Shamar James is hurt. Scooby Williams is playing hurt. Why isn't there better depth at linebacker? Why wasn't the portal used better? So look, for every excuse, and a lot of them are quite valid, quite frankly, there's also a counter to that excuse, which is, well, why are you in this position to begin with? And I get that. They haven't been there that long. Okay, that's a valid excuse. However, with the portal, that allows you to bridge the gap between the old guys and your guys, the past and the future. So, it's not that some of these aren't valid complaints. And I agree with a lot of people with what they're saying, but, Florida counters with what it's saying as well. So you're just trying to find the balance, what's wrong, right? Is it just the youth? Is there some coaching issues? Is there, was the portal not utilized? Well, it's probably, Nick, a combination of everything. No staff is perfect. They know that. It's a young team. And then also, quite frankly, some of the guys they brought in from the portal that people were excited about haven't produced at the level a lot of us thought they might produce that. So they're going to have to do better in the portal. They're going to return a lot of good young players, Nick. You're going to return a starting quarterback, we think. You're going to return some good running backs. You're going to turn some solid receivers. You probably need a veteran receiver to go in there. I put on our message board tonight at Gators Online some of the things I think, Nick, where they need guys, and I'm going to let you do the talking here. I think, you want a veteran receiver, 1 to 2 new offensive linemen from the portal, an edge rusher or 2 with experience so you don't have to rush LJ McCray into 38 snaps a game. You're going to need some linebackers, not just depth guys, not just guys that can't play that are backups, but guys that can play and can play when other guys get hurt and there's not a significant drop-off. And then in the secondary, you're going to, again, need more depth at safety. I mean, it's like quality guys, and they're out there. They are out there. There are teams that have done very well in the portal with guys that none of us had ever heard of, right? It's not our job to go find them. It's the Florida staff's job to go find them. And if they don't, then that's quite frankly on them. And they know that. Again, it's not me lecturing them. They know that, Nick. But the biggest needs for you, Nick, in the portal during the offseason would be what? Across the board. Yeah, we talked about edge, and linebacker.
I think you hit on those. You need it's frustrating because you look at the guys that are playing now, like you got a Manny Nunnery, a Taraja Mitchell, just talk about that. I mean, they talked about how many snaps he had played, and a former captain. He can't get on the field unless it's special teams. Deuce Spurlock is a guy that they brought in, and he's not playing. He already used his red shirt, so he's just wasting a year, wasting a scholarship right now. You're taking guys because you thought you needed to for depth, and they're not even getting on when you need depth because the guys that are good enough to play are hurt. So I think maybe they missed on some evaluations, but also when you get into the portal, there's going to be a what's the balance? Hey, we want to get Xavier Filsaime playing time as a freshman. Do we need to go and get a safety? So I think there's a balance there. You have to strike that balance. I think Billy Napier wants to build his program through the high school recruiting ranks and supplement with the transfer portal. I don't have any confidence that they will do well in the second transfer portal period because of how long their evaluations take. So this first portal period that opens in December, they need to find those spots. And I think you're right. Offensive line depth is going to be huge, especially if, guys like Kingsley Aguakin and Micah Mazuka go to the NFL or declare for the draft. That's going to be a huge position where you need to get depth. I think you use a starting tackle. We had unfortunate news about Keontae Goodwin's mother, so our prayers are with him and his family. Does he want to play football again? Does he want to come back to Florida? That could be a guy that you could get not necessarily through the transfer portal, but that you've already gotten that would then be able to play. You need offensive tackle help. I don't think the guys that they've had this year have had great seasons. So it'll be interesting to see if Austin Barber does leave, which, I don't think he's had the year that we expected or the NFL teams expected him to have. So to me, you need a ton of depth. And when I look at how much Florida needs, you're going to have a lot of guys leave. So I'll say this now. When you see Florida lose 10, 15, 16, 17 guys to the transfer portal, don't freak out that everyone's quitting on Billy. You have to process some guys out of your program to make room for the recruiting class and then to bring other transfers in. There's going to be a lot of attrition on Florida's roster after the year.
Nick Animal's asking, have you ever seen where a 5-win team got to go to a postseason bowl game? Yes. Yeah. I think only though if Nick, if nobody else, you tell them.
Yeah, so listen, they have so many bowl games now that it's become more and more frequent. If you're 5-7, they go by your APR score, which I think is like a bunch of calculations, but it's basically how much you graduate and how much studenting are your student athletes doing, Keith, and how good of students are your athletes. So Florida could get into a bowl game at 5-7 because they have a high APR score. And I think last time I looked, there are a bunch of teams. The teams that are ahead of them are like in bowl games. So like there's a chance that Florida could get a bowl game at 5-7. That's tough. Okay. That's a tough chance to go 5-8.
We got a lot of comments here, Nick, but let's get back to the game for a second. It's funny. I mean, Nick, you and I were out in Utah together. So were a lot of people listening. We had a great trip out there other than the game. And after that game, I would have never guessed that 9 games later, we'd be looking at a fairly decent Florida offense and a defense that was just continually getting worse, it seems like. So let's talk about the offense a little bit. And still, it's a flawed offense, Nick, because the offensive line still definitely isn't one of the 10 best offensive lines in the SEC, but they're getting it done. They're scoring. Now, obviously, LSU's defense wasn't that great. They didn't do great against Georgia during the 2 quarters that counted, but they're putting up points. They're showing some potential. Eugene Wilson's a star. The running backs are excellent. More playmakers are going to need to emerge. The tight ends are looking like they have some potential. But, Nick, it does look like the offense filling a couple gaps during the portal season could be pretty damn good next year. Am I just getting excited about nothing, or is there some potential for this offense?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I don't think the NFL values running backs at all. So what will Montrell Johnson do? Montrell Johnson, I think, is probably a 4th round, 5th round guy. But in the NFL, you want to get to your second contract. And if you look at Florida's running back room, what will the share of total share of carries be next year? How much will coming back for your senior year help Montrell in the next draft? So I think Montrell should go. if it makes sense to him. Listen, if you love college and you want to keep playing college football, more power to you. Then Florida's running back room would be super experienced with him and ETN and Trayon Webb. Cam Carroll is coming back after his knee surgery. Ran into him down in Baton Rouge on the field and was talking to him. And, he's attacking his rehab. He's off crutches. And feel good story for me just to see him, a guy who only had one more year and will be back next year for them. So it's a deep running back room. You still don't have receivers that I like. I think Andy Jean's good. I think Aiden Mizell is good. I think Caleb Douglas can be okay. But other than Eugene Wilson, nobody in that receiver room strikes fear in a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and that's why I think they need to go out and get a veteran receiver, like a legit guy. Now, the difference is I think the selling, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, and everybody listening, we try to be optimistic, even though we're both perceived to be the most negative guys alive. But it seems like the selling job would be a little bit easier for a one-year guy next year, this offseason, than it was last year. In other words, a receiver. So, and what I'm saying is because now it's proven that Graham Mertz doesn't suck, right? He's not bad. And if he comes back, he's going to have one more year of experience in this offense, regardless of whether there's a new OC or not. Essentially, it's Billy Napier's probably going to have his hands. It's going to be his offense, right? So, it's an easier sell. We got a guy that can get you the ball. If you need a left tackle, hey, look what the other pieces are coming back. Yeah, Trevor Etienne was pretty good the last year, but now here's another year of these backs that they're making rise. Look what they can do. Look what these young receivers can do. Look at these exciting tight ends can do. Okay. So you're the missing piece now of this offense, the left tackle, let's say, or the 6'4" receiver. So I think it'll be a little bit, well, not a lot, a little bit, should be a lot easier selling job. And if you're NIL people at Florida, isn't that where your money's spent, Nick, at this offseason? I mean, because it's now to the point where you're trying to build a program, but then next year you got to win. And it's that simple. You got to win. It can't all be about the future. Like you said, you got to kind of recruit these two things at once. You're building a program on the one hand, that's the future, and you're building a team on the other. The program build looks like it's coming along. The team build is now this next step to get them ready for next year. I hope I'm explaining that okay. But Nick, is that where you'd put your NIL chips into the portal? I mean, I'd be grabbing all the marbles off the table right now and saying, this is where it's going, man. They got to win now. I mean, they got to do something. They need 4 or 5 players that can be impact guys next year, not just 13th best starter in the SEC at his position, like a literal, hey, this guy can play. He's going to take Florida to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's offensive tackles, elite offensive tackles are not normally in the portal. Those guys are 5 stars. They go somewhere. They play early. They start by their sophomore year. They start as a junior, and then they go to the NFL, and they get paid very well to protect quarterbacks. So Florida needs help at offensive tackle, especially if Austin Barber decides to go to the NFL. I think he should stay, but if he leaves, they need offensive tackle help, and I don't know where you get it. Keith, I'm sure you hear the name Seton more than I do, but I don't know if I'm trusting – no matter how good you are, I don't know that I'm trusting a freshman left tackle, right tackle to come in and play right away, or if he's even going to be a Gator. It's just Florida fans coveting someone who
there was a year
they're putting Jordan Seton into the starting lineup in 2024 before he's even picked a school.
Nick, there was a season, and some of you may remember, I'm old, whatever, make fun of me all you want. 1992, right? Spurrier's 3rd year after 2 really good years to start. And they had a rebuilt offensive line in year 3. Some guys that normally wouldn't have been starting had to start. And Florida early in the season, Nick, Spurrier was desperate. And I think the offensive line coach back then, I believe it was a guy named Jimmy Ray Stevens, who had coached at Florida or played at Florida as well. And they actually started 2 tackles that were freshmen that season, almost the whole season. The right tackle, I believe, was Reggie Green. I can't remember where he was from. I want to say Sarasota, but I can't remember for sure. And he ended up being a good player for 4 years. The left tackle, father of Jonathan Odom, Florida tight end, Jason Odom, 4-year starter. And by the time those guys were seniors at 92, 93, 94, 95, they were a national championship contender. They played in the national championship game. Got the doors blown off of them by Nebraska, but they were in the championship game. But it's not ideal. It made that season difficult. Now, it would have – look, I mean, they didn't have anybody. They had to play the guys. But you didn't have the portal then. You have the portal now. So it looks like you got a young dude that's going to have to play tackle. I mean, you're going to tell a guy like Jordan Seaton, yes, you're coming in, you're going to get this starting job. You're going to have every chance to get that season. But he's still going to have to go out and win it. And it's a big, big jump. Let's just be honest. So I agree with you there, Nick. Hey, Nick, looking ahead to the rest of this season, you always wonder the psyche of a team when you start losing games. Like we said this at the beginning of the year, theoretically, with Florida being young, they should get better, right? Theoretically. But when you start losing games, you start playing like you're a 5-5 team. You may have more talent, but if you're playing at 96% instead of 100%, that tiny little bit really hurts you. So how do you feel like the team's psyche is going to be this season? That's 3 pretty devastating losses in a row, Nick. One, because Georgia just put you right back in your place and made you realize you got a long way to go. Then you lost to an Arkansas team and you're thinking, hey, they got a new OC. They got new life. Turns out they're terrible. They're awful. They're awful. They caught lightning in a bottle, and it was against Florida, and Auburn just manhandled them last week on both lines of scrimmage. That's concerning. Then you go out to LSU and you're in this shootout, which you're not going to win a shootout with LSU. So it's been a pretty humbling 3 weeks, Nick. So how does Florida, can a young team, again, we're making the excuse too, but can a young team pull it together? Because these next 2 games are going to be challenging. But if you can win one, you go to a bowl game, sure. But it's bigger than that. You can kind of get everybody on the same page. Hey, you know what? They fought through this season. They took their lumps. It's a young team, but they beat a good team in their final 2 games. Is it possible, Nick? And what do they got to do? You're on mute. I'm glad you did it. I do it every show, and I did it earlier when you were gone. So
I keep muting because I'm coughing so much.
Me too.
It would go whatever was on Bourbon Street.
yeah.
I think the staff has done a really good job of getting the guys to buy in. And I think if you were honest with probably some of the older guys before the season, they would have agreed with some of our preseason predictions about what the season would be, Keith, if they were being honest with themselves. So I think I don't think that you've lost the locker room. I had a couple fans point out to me they were losing the locker room. Look, Jordan Herman transferred with only 2 games left. He's quitting. I'm like, okay, well, this is a kid you took a flyer on at a JUCO because he certainly looks the part at like 6'8" and 370 pounds. Looks like an absolute monster. Just couldn't get on the field. And I'm talking about could not get on the field for an offensive line that's just okay.
Yeah.
So I think for him, it's okay. From a junior college, tried it for 2 years here. It's not working. I need to, go somewhere where I can play, and it's not going to be here. I don't know why you leave with 2 games left, but maybe something happened in the locker room. I don't know.
Nick, a lot of young guys are playing on defense. I sound like Billy Napier here, but there were some plays that people ran on Twitter where Florida got pushed around a little bit, and it wasn't the young guys getting pushed around.
Yeah.
It was some of the got to plug in my computer here before it dies. It was some of the older guys. So here's a question from Gary, and Gary, we appreciate the question. We appreciate all your questions, quite frankly. But why is the defense regressed? That's a tough one to answer. I know it's hard to put your finger on one thing. But what's your gut telling you? Is there some reason for this, Nick? Is there what's going on, man? I guess that's what it's a hard one to answer. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think a couple points. I was making this when my computer died and had to go grab a different laptop. I think I asked Billy Napier a question last week, and he kind of didn't know how to answer it. Maybe he hadn't thought of it before. And as you said, Keith, when you think of young players as the season goes, there should be an upward trajectory. Also, I look at like Jordan Castell, though. He's an 18, 19-year-old kid. He's played over 400 snaps. He's probably never played that much football. And he's played against 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old, 24-year-old COVID seniors coming back. So I think when I see I think I like Austin Armstrong's scheme. I'm watching guys try to arm tackle. I'm watching them get blown up. And, some of the older guys, like, listen, Derek Wingo – is on like an injured ankle, needs shoulder surgery again. Like him getting blown up, like it makes sense. He's already hurt. But I don't think Jordan Castell is tackled well, specifically late. And that's when I wonder, hey, are the freshmen just breaking down wearing down at the end of the season. I think that could be part of it. Florida's giving up just an unbelievable number of big plays. LSU had, in terms of passing plays, this stat says if any passing play over 15 yards is a big play, 8 explosive or big plays through the air, and 8 on the ground. So 16 explosive plays from LSU on Saturday night. I think that's going to be just part of this defense. You're going to give up some explosives. You don't want to give up 16. Like, give up 4, 3. If you're talking about 15, 10 yards in a game, but 16 is how you get to that number 701, Keith.
So, Nick, Gary says, hey, if Jim Harbaugh leaves Michigan, the OC up there would be a great hire. Love Michigan's running game. Michigan usually has the best offensive line in college football. That's the difference. Sometimes you're only as good as the talent you got. Look, there's a reason why in the NFL, guys will win the Super Bowl 1 year and 2 years later they're fired. They didn't change. The same guys. Maybe the quarterback got hurt. Maybe the left tackle signed with the Bengals and left your team. I mean, you are a product of your talent, but, you still have to coach guys. You still have to develop guys. You still have to be good on game day and eliminate some of the ticky-tack problems they've had that have been really costly. It's interesting. All right, let's see. Barone71 says, Tam, you had a Happy Gilmore large check presentation at halftime for Jimbo's buyout. that was quite an interesting few days at A&M. They just destroyed Mississippi State, and then Jimbo's fired on Sunday, and then today Mississippi State fired its coach Zach Arnett. So it's the patience people have. And look, I get it, man. I mean, you've got the portal. It's not just losing. Are you showing progress? Are you getting blown out? Okay, and those things matter. Perception matters, and Florida State with Willie Taggart, they cut the cord a year and a half in. They just thought that it was going to cost them so much money to keep losing and keep being just in disarray that it was better to lose money now and try to regain it later. It took a while to get out of that hole, and boy, do they have to be patient, and they're out of that hole.
I mean,
ups are in the ACC, obviously, but
FSU wanted to fire Mike Norvell. Florida State just didn't have the money to fire Mike Norvell, and so now if you would have bent to the will and gone into more debt for your fans, you would be on a different coach right now, and you wouldn't have the season that you're having. And I'm not saying that Florida should stick with Billy for 7 straight losing seasons if it takes that long to get right, but I just keep seeing the same cycle over and over again and over again. And it's 3 years, 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, and we're just hitting the reset button. And I feel like I'm writing the same stories on a 3-year cycle. It's okay. Well, it's their new coach. Everyone's excited, and season went okay. Season's starting to go bad. Okay, new coach. Everyone's excited. But I think FSU might have just lucked into the season they're having because their fans certainly wanted Money Mike out of there, and Florida fans were trying to write the extension for the. Well,
they got hot at the end of last year, and that really started it. And they had such great success in the portal. This isn't an FSU show. Their schedule's been horrible this year, but that's not their fault. That's not their fault. You just play who's in front of you, and they did beat LSU. So the one pretty good team they played, really good offense, they beat the brakes off of in the second half. All right, Nick, we got an important question here. J Royalty Hebrew. That's an interesting name. He says, y'all ever notice when Billy Napier is asked a tough question, he immediately picks up his water bottle? Nick, you've covered this man for 2 years. Is J Royalty Hebrew correct here?
Sometimes, not always. Also,
you don't know, do you?
You see me how much I'm drinking. I go to drink on this show, but I'm talking a lot. My throat gets sore, and I think that's the same thing. But listen, like when he says, yeah, no, that's just like him. That's like saying, collecting your thoughts. I think sometimes if he has a question where he thinks he needs to think, that's just gives you time while, you're taking a sip of water to gather your thoughts before you answer.
All right. So we got some more comments and questions here, and we're going to dip out in a few minutes. But if you like what we're doing, Nick always has to remind me to say this: hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. And obviously right now at Gators Online, and it's not even right now, it's the thing we're doing. We want to get people in the door, $1 for 1 month. If you join right now, that's going to get you right up to signing day. And listen, there could be more decommitments, sure, but there's going to be more commitments too. And then we're going to enter transfer portal season, and we'll have everybody working on that. That's really tough to follow. but we will do our best to kind of keep you in the loop the best we can. But there's going to be a lot going on. Even in a losing season, there's always, once the season ends and everybody kind of backs away from the ledge, then you start thinking about all the positives working toward next season. Nick, I'm trying to get some of these comments. Out of FSU and Missouri, which one do you think Florida's got the better chance of winning? Everybody seems to think it's FSU because it's at home. But you look at Missouri, they've played 2 big emotional games in a row, lost one at Georgia, won one against Tennessee. It's really hard to be up 3 weeks in a row. And hate to say this, but I just don't know that playing Florida lights a fire under somebody like it used to. Does that, I'm just being honest, does that, and look, that isn't always going to be the case, but right now I think that's where it is. Does Florida have any kind of opening, or do you think their best chance of the last 2 is to beat FSU at home? And quite frankly, FSU has not been great on the road this season. What do you think? Take it away, Nick.
Yeah, FSU is haven't been impressed. I don't know if there is a dominant team, but certainly FSU has had some games where not overly impressive. But like Miami's not very good, but it's a rivalry and you struggle with Miami. I think it's probably easier for me based on how Florida is so terrible on the road, outside of beating a bad South Carolina team, which I think a lot of people overreacted to, because South Carolina just stinks. I think the thing for me, it will be, you probably have a better chance of winning at home. But Keith, on June 12th, you made us pick the season. My picks are 10-0. So I think I've got Florida winning the next 2 in those picks. I've been right all year long, and there's no shame in picking games in June and finishing 10-2.
Well, we're going to throw some shame on you right now. Jeremy wants some answers. I wish y'all asked Niebuhr the tough questions in press conferences. I have no doubt, first of all, if Jeremy was in there, he'd take off his Gators hat and throw it at Niebuhr to start every press conference. But Nick, why do you all not ask the tough questions, as Jeremy said? He just kind of explained that. I'm kidding with you, Nick, obviously. And Jeremy, you're making a pretty good point, even if maybe you're trying to be a smart ass, quite frankly. So you have to understand how the reporter-coach relationships work, and it isn't a good point within your question. Nick, just explain how press conferences work and why people aren't just in the face of the coach demanding answers after every game.
Yeah, I mean, one, you have to get called on to ask your question. We're not in there just in a scrum, just yelling questions, and until somebody stops talking and only one person's left yelling. The questions that you want asked when you're yelling at us on Twitter to ask them, we're not going to read out your tweet. Ask that MFer why his POS offense can't do. It's like, hey, that's not the way you talk to another human that you have a working relationship with. So there's a balance of asking tough questions. There's also a balance of what are people going to read, and as much as we are trying to write good stories, I can write a great story. Keith could pay for me to fly to Australia to stay with Jeremy Crawshaw's parents. I could write a great feature on Jeremy Crawshaw. I don't know that anyone will click on it because he's a punter. So you're writing and trying to find angles that fans want to read about. And we can't make somebody give you the answer you want. So you can ask the question, but it doesn't mean you're going to get the answer that satisfies that. But I do love how us not asking hard enough questions definitely leads to Florida losing football games.
Well, one of the things is, and Jeremy, I was just teasing you. I think it's okay. You ask whatever you want. We're here for you, and we appreciate your question. But there is a balance, and I've covered teams before too, Nick, and you got to be sort of measured, not sort of. You really do, because forget about just upsetting the head coach. He may never call on you again. But the people that like and respect him in that building, you may have as sources, and they may stop returning your calls. So you have to really say, how can I be professional here, but also try to get the fans, the readers, the answers they're looking for? How do we get to the bottom of all this? And then, obviously, if you watch Billy Napier's press conferences, he ain't going to tell you anyway. You can call him every name let's just hypothetically, if Nick went in there guns a-blazing and just said, listen, you SOB, you're going to answer my question. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. So sometimes you have to fight the battles that you can win They're just trying as reporters to get what they can out of him, to shed some light on what he's thinking, okay? We all saw them give up 700 yards. If they knew the answer to why, they'd figure it out and fix it. As we said, it's probably a multitude of things. It's not always easily fixable. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. But again, Jeremy, thank you. Hey, look, I think that's probably it, Nick. 45 minutes. We didn't get to everybody. It's hard. I know we're blabbing. I'm blabbing. Nick's blabbing.
We're both very long-winded.
We are, but we want to have a good time. We want y'all to enjoy talking about Gator football, even in a season like this. And Nick, again, you weren't born, but there was that one team that never won a game. They didn't win a game, 1979, but there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And looking back, they won 8 games the next year. It was the biggest turnaround in NCAA history and should have beat Georgia. But people look back on that team fondly, believe it or not, because they tried. They played hard. And they fought to the very end. And Nick, in week 10, he only played 11 games back then. In week 10, a Florida team that had 0 wins, 8 losses, and 1 tie, played 9-0 Florida State at Florida Field. 9-0 versus 8-1. And Florida led that game in the second half. They fought. They fought hard, and they won the fan base over. And the Gator fans thought, you know what? There are better days ahead, and they were. This team, if it shows some fight, I know Billy Napier said that they showed a lot of fight the other night in Baton Rouge, but it's very hard to convince people of that, Nick, when you lose by 17. But anyway, that will do it for this edition of Talking Gators, the Gators Online live show. I'm Keith Niebuhr. That is Nick Torre. Again, if you enjoy these shows, hit the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, pass it along to friends. We appreciate all of you. Leave a comment. And again, go to gatorsonline.com right now. $1 for 1 month of great coverage. It's going to be an exciting week, Nick. I mean, look, they're just trying to get to a bowl game. I mean, maybe they will pull a rabbit out of their hat. Nick, win or loss this week, W or L? What do you think?
Don't feel good, Keith. Don't feel good about it. These guys play hard, but I've seen a lot of losses when I've walked out of that Missouri stadium in Senior Day for the Missouri Tigers. They give out rocks. That rock M they have, they give out rocks to their seniors. Maybe Florida will throw a rock in their plans.
Yeah, well, we'll see. That's it for this edition of the show. We appreciate everybody. Have a good week, and we'll do it again soon. We'll have a recruiting show this week. Don't forget, usually on Thursdays, Nick and Zach Alberverdi, our 2 beat reporters, go live. Make sure you get in there, jump on them. Tell these SOBs that they need to ask tougher questions. And have a safe week, guys. Y'all take care, all right?